Great. My name is Laura McBain, and I am the managing director of the Stanford D School. So I think about divergent thinking, the capacity to think about things in multiple ways, not just one linear pathway. And I think it's really important now for a number of reasons. One is that the challenges that young people face today, whether at university, K-12, workforce, doesn't matter, requires folks to think about different approaches to complex problems. And complex problems do not beget simple solutions. But when we ask broad questions, they allow us to have lots of ways to approach things. And so, as people are thinking about education today, whether it's tackling climate change, global poverty, policy, governments, you name it, these are not simple questions. These are not simple problems. They require people to think in complex, nonlinear, divergent ways to tackle them. And so I think one of the single most things we can do when we're thinking about education today is how do we help people unlock their own divergent ways of thinking and notice it when it's happening. I think one of the dangers in education, again, university, K-12, it doesn't really matter. We often want students to give us the answer. And whether it's 2 + 2 = 4, I think we need to pause sometimes and ask questions and give credit when students turn in something that you did not anticipate, that surprised you, that wasn't what you expected. That type of thinking is where divergent innovation ideas come from. And I think right now, particularly in different settings, we often want students to give us the answer that we expect them to give. And if we're asking people to be truly innovative, truly novel, to create new ways of being, knowing, and creating, we have to be open to crazy ideas that you never could imagine if we're going to tackle some of the world's biggest problems. I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. Practice making with your hands is one. Going on what we call a wander walk. David Kelly is the founder of the D School. He likes to go on a wander walk, which is you wander and you start observing things in the world. You start noticing things around you, objects, people, experiences, energy, and you ask the question, what is going on there? I think one of the best ways to be a divergent thinker is to start noticing. And then in the talk that I gave today, I share kind of four key insights. One is like start asking and listening to folks who are often not heard. That's really important. The second way is to think about how do you actually flip a question, challenge the assumptions. We call it assumption storming. If you have a question, ask what are the assumptions this question holds so you can radically unpack and get to a different question. And then the last couple things is to think about like how do you really think about what is happening well. We often are trying to figure out a solution or the challenge, but there are other approaches, which is starting to notice what's going well because we often overlook them. And then we rush to a different solution when the possible solution is right there in plain sight. And then the last one as leaders is like start noticing the people who do things differently and create space with them to share their ideas in new and new ways with each other. Because what happens is when we have diverse or divergent thinkers together, we often ostracize them. They're the crazy creatives, the people on the sides. But how do we actually bring people together who are divergent thinkers to make space and set them on a purpose together? Those are the things that we can start doing to not just include them, but to actually make momentum with them. I think one thing that people is a misnomer with design is that it's a very process. I do empathy, I do definition, I prototype, I synthesize, I test, that most people think it's that type of process. But design methodologies can show up every day. Perhaps that is doing empathy interviews with someone. You can do that in and out of a classroom. You can do brainstorm, ideation anytime when you're starting to project. So for example, let's say you are teaching, I'm just going to use my own experience. Let's say you want to teach an essay writing with students. Before you give students a blank piece of paper and say, write a paper on X, the better way to start is like give students an opportunity to brainstorm wild ways to approach that paper. Fill the paper up with wild ideas. And then from there, you can start creating and writing. but not assume that people know how to get there right away. I think one of the dangers when we're thinking about creativity or divergent thinkers is that people naturally know how to do it, but we can create conditions where people can start brainstorming different approaches together so that they can see that the creative process is not something that's just me, but it's actually something we can do together in a communal constructivist process. And so there are tools, whether it's brainstorming, empathy, and building with your hands. All of these things unlock different ways of making and different ways about thinking of ideas. I mean, right now, one of our other keynote speakers talk about the moment of AI, artificial intelligence. And I think we see that AI is getting more efficient in doing what I would call our mundane tasks, the tasks that we can do. It can do my homework sometimes for me, right? Which means maybe I didn't ask a good question for my homework. It can do math problems, maybe not so good, but it can do simple things that allow me to do quicker and faster. And so in a moment like this, when AI is actually getting faster and more efficient, the thing that's actually probably most important and from the human perspective is how do we unlock, how do we recover, how do we find that spark that makes us uniquely human? AI can't do that. I was talking to a gentleman here, and AI essentially is binary code, making sense of data. It's binary, yes, no, one, zero. The human brain is not that. The human brain is actually always attention, all at odds, that actually don't make sense together. And so uncovering and understanding how your brain works, your neuroplasticity, sparking that divergence is something that makes us uniquely human that AI is not doing, not yet. And so having that piece where we're basically recommending or we call broad spectrum thinking, if you will, living with the tensions that are odds with each other, human brains can take that on and hold the complexity and the ambiguity with that because our brains work like a universe of ideas fitting together, not a question and an answer response. So for me, that's a personal story, actually. So when I was a young person, I did not do well in school. I had a learning disability. I spoke with a lisp. I couldn't say my name. I was Laura or Lara. I couldn't say that. I was lunch. I couldn't say lunch. I would say lunch. And so one of the things that impacted me is I received special services in order to read and learn to read and to speak. And so one of the things that I learned in that moment is I was gifted support by teachers to help. They saw something in me that I didn't see myself. They invested in me in a moment where I was like, well, I can't do this. And so I think this idea of having teachers who basically see what I would consider the unbounded potential of people is really important. And so I was the gift or the beneficiary of teachers who said, I know that this test score or this idea is not fully who you are. You don't do well on this, but I think there's more there. And so for me, when I think about what it means to be a university educator, a designer, you name it, I think when I think about most meaningful education is how do we remove the predictability within schooling and within universities? And how do we really tap into the basically unmeasurable potential of people? I had that experience as a young person where someone saw that, got rid of predictability, allowed me to flex my potential, and that allowed me to become who I am. And I think we need more of those experiences, particularly for people who are often underinvested, overlooked, folks of color who are often put off to the side. If we do that, we'll create a better society. So far, it's been a lovely conference. Not only being in Mallorca, and a beautiful place, but I think one for me as someone who likes coming to conferences, to me, it's always about the people and the stories that come up. I met people today who are thinking differently about how they want to create more transformative learning experiences from a creative or a cognitive approach. And so what's been for me the most interesting, I'd say, learning experience here at the conference is the people that you meet who are trying to think differently about what university education needs to be.